The screech of motorcycle tires against asphalt shattered the afternoon calm as six leather-clad bikers surrounded a lone teenager in a business suit. Michael Carter, 16, stood motionless in Fairfield Park, his briefcase clutched tight while engines revved menacingly around him. The leader's scarred face twisted into a cruel grin. "Wrong place, wrong time, rich boy." But Michael's steady breathing and balanced stance hinted at secrets these bullies couldn't imagine. What happened next would change everything, and it was all caught on camera. Stay with me until the end of this incredible story, and comment what city you're watching from, so I can see how far this tale has traveled. The autumn sun cast long shadows across Fairfield Park as Michael Carter adjusted his navy blazer and checked his watch for the third time. 4:47 p.m. Jordan's soccer practice should have ended 17 minutes ago, but his younger brother was nowhere to be seen. Michael's polished Oxford shoes crunched softly against the fallen leaves as he paced near the parking lot, his leather briefcase swinging gently at his side. At 16, Michael looked more like a young businessman than a typical high school student. His pressed white shirt, perfectly knotted tie, and immaculate appearance drew curious glances from other parents picking up their children. But Michael had learned long ago that first impressions mattered. His mother had drilled that lesson into him since childhood. "Presentation is everything, Michael," she would say, straightening his collar before school. "People judge you in the first 3 seconds. Make those seconds count." The distant rumble of motorcycles interrupted his thoughts, growing louder with each passing moment. Michael's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly as 6 Harley-Davidsons roared into the park's parking lot, their chrome gleaming in the afternoon light. The bikes moved in formation like predators circling prey, before coming to a stop in a loose semicircle near the playground equipment. Michael's hand instinctively moved to his phone, but he stopped himself. No need to look worried. Not yet. The first biker to dismount was massive, easily 6'4", with arms like tree trunks stretching his black leather vest. A spiderweb tattoo crawled up his neck, disappearing beneath a bandana that barely contained his greasy hair. The patch on his vest read Razor in bold letters, and below it, Road Devils MC. "Well, well." Razor's voice carried across the parking lot like gravel being crushed. "Look what we got here, boys. Fancy little rich kid waiting for his mommy." The other bikers laughed a harsh sound that made several parents quickly usher their children toward their cars. Michael noticed an elderly woman with a small dog hurrying away, her face pale with fear. A father lifted his toddler and practically ran to his minivan. Michael remained perfectly still, his breathing steady and controlled. His mother's voice echoed in his mind. "Never let them see you sweat, baby. Fear is just another emotion you choose whether to feed it or starve it." The second biker, lean and wiry with arms covered in faded tattoos, sauntered closer. His vest identified him as Snake, and his cold gray eyes reminded Michael of a reptile sizing up its next meal. "Nice suit, kid. What's the occasion? Funeral? Maybe it's about to be..." Added a third biker with a thick beard and a gold tooth that glinted when he smiled. His patch read Diesel, and he cracked his knuckles menacingly. Michael's mind raced, calculating distances and angles while maintaining his calm exterior. The nearest exit was 40 yards to his left, but that would mean abandoning Jordan, who was still somewhere on the soccer field. His younger brother was only 12, innocent, trusting, and completely unaware of the danger brewing in the parking lot. "Cat got your tongue, pretty boy." Razor took another step forward, now less than 10 feet away. "Or are you too good to talk to folks like us?" For the first time, Michael spoke, his voice clear and steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. "I'm just waiting for my brother. We're not looking for any trouble." The bikers exchanged glances, and Michael caught something in their expressions: surprise, maybe even a flicker of respect for his composure. But Razor's face quickly hardened again. "Trouble?" Razor laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "Who said anything about trouble? We're just being friendly. Aren't we being friendly, boys?" Snake circled around to Michael's right, while Diesel moved left, clearly attempting to box him in. The other three bikers, a heavy-set man with Tank on his vest, a skeletal figure called Bones, and a younger biker with Rookie emblazoned across his leather, formed the outer perimeter. Michael's eyes tracked each movement with the precision of a chess master, anticipating his opponent's next move. His body remained relaxed, but his weight had shifted almost imperceptibly to the balls of his feet. Years of training had taught him that tension was the enemy of speed. "Your brother, huh?" Snake's voice was silk wrapped around steel. "What's a kid like that doing with a brother dressed like some Wall Street wannabe, different interests?" Michael replied, simply refusing to take the bait. Tank, the heavy-set biker, laughed and slapped his knee. "Different interests. You hear that rich boys got different interests than his baby brother." The mockery in Tank's voice was designed to provoke a reaction, but Michael had learned long ago to separate his emotions from his responses. His mother used to practice with him, hurling insults and challenges while he maintained perfect composure. "Emotional reactions are luxury items, Michael," she would say after each training session. "Some people can afford them. You cannot." From the corner of his eye, Michael spotted Jordan finally emerging from the soccer field, his cleats hanging around his neck, and his jersey grass-stained from practice. The 12-year-old was heading straight toward the parking lot, completely oblivious to the dangerous situation unfolding near their meeting spot. Michael's heart rate increased for the first time since the bikers had arrived. "There he is now." Diesel pointed toward Jordan with a tattooed finger. "Little guy looks tired from all that running around. Maybe he needs a ride home." The implied threat hung in the air like smoke from their exhaust pipes. Michael felt his carefully maintained control waver for just a moment, long enough for Razor to notice the change in his expression. "Oh, that got your attention, didn't it?" Razor's scarred face split into a predatory grin. Big Brother's protective instincts kicking in. Jordan was now 50 yards away and closing fast, his face lighting up when he spotted Michael in his usual waiting position. The boy had no idea that 6 dangerous men were discussing him like a piece of meat. "Here's what's going to happen," Razor said, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "You and your baby brother are going to show us some respect. Maybe empty out that fancy briefcase, share whatever allowance money Daddy gave you this week." Michael's grip on his briefcase tightened slightly, the only outward sign of his growing tension. Inside the leather case were his homework assignments, a few textbooks, and exactly $17 in cash. Nothing worth this confrontation, but he understood this wasn't really about money. This was about power, about humiliation, about 6 grown men needing to feel superior to a teenager in a suit. "We don't have much," Michael said quietly, his eyes never leaving Razor's face. "But you can have whatever we've got. Just let us leave after." Snake laughed a sound like fingernails on a chalkboard. "Listen to him negotiate. Kid thinks this is some kind of business transaction." "Maybe it is." Bones spoke for the first time, his voice surprisingly high-pitched for such a gaunt frame. "Maybe rich boy here thinks he can buy his way out of everything." Jordan was now 30 yards away, close enough that Michael could see his brother's confused expression as he noticed the crowd of bikers. The boy's steps slowed, uncertainty replacing his earlier enthusiasm. Michael made a split-second decision that would change everything. "Jordan," he called out, his voice carrying across the parking lot with surprising authority. "Stay where you are for a minute, okay? I'll be right with you." The 12-year-old stopped immediately, trained by years of following his older brother's instructions without question. But his face showed growing alarm as he took in the scene, 6 large men on motorcycles surrounding his brother, like wolves circling a lone sheep. "Smart kid," Tank observed. "Knows how to follow orders. That's a useful skill." The implied threat in Tank's words made Michael's blood run cold, but he forced his expression to remain neutral. His mother's training had prepared him for many things, but protecting Jordan while outnumbered 6-1 had never been part of the curriculum. Razor took another step closer now, near enough that Michael could smell the mixture of leather motor oil and stale cigarettes that clung to the man's clothes. Here's the thing, suit boy. Respect isn't something you can just hand over like lunch money. It's something you earn, and right now you haven't earned shit. Michael's mind flashed back to a conversation he'd had with his mother just 3 weeks ago. They'd been practicing in their basement, working through defensive scenarios, when she'd stopped mid-demonstration. "Michael," she'd said, her voice unusually serious, "there may come a day when you have to choose between staying hidden and protecting someone you love. When that day comes, you'll know what to do." He'd asked her what she meant, but she'd just smiled and moved on to the next exercise. Now, watching Jordan's frightened face from across the parking lot, Michael understood. "You want respect?" Michael's voice remained steady, but something in his tone had changed, a subtle shift that made Razor's eyes narrow. "What exactly did you have in mind?" Diesel cracked his knuckles again, the sound echoing off the nearby trees. "How about you get down on your knees and ask real nice? Say, please, Mr. Razor, sir, may my baby brother and I go home to our mansion?" The other bikers erupted in laughter, but Michael noticed that Rookie, the youngest of the group, looked uncomfortable with the escalating situation. The kid couldn't be much older than Michael himself, and something in his expression suggested he hadn't signed up for terrorizing teenagers. "Come on, Razor," Rookie said quietly. "Kid's just waiting for his brother. Maybe you should shut the hell up," Razor snapped, without taking his eyes off Michael. "Nobody asked for your opinion, prospect." Rookie's face flushed with embarrassment, but he fell silent. Michael filed the interaction away. Dissension in the ranks could be useful if things escalated further. A small crowd had begun to gather at a safe distance. Mrs. Henderson from down the street stood near her car, with her phone out, clearly debating whether to call the police. A jogger had stopped on the nearby path, pretending to stretch, while obviously eavesdropping. 2 teenagers with skateboards watched from behind a park bench, their eyes wide with excitement and fear. Michael realized that whatever happened next would have an audience. The thought should have made him more nervous, but instead it brought an odd sense of calm. Witnesses meant accountability. Even bikers thought twice about seriously hurting someone when cameras might be recording. "You know what I think?" Snake had positioned himself directly to Michael's right, close enough to grab him if necessary. "I think Rich Boy here needs a lesson in humility. Daddy's money can't buy him out of every situation." "That's enough." The voice came from behind the bikers, crisp and authoritative. Everyone turned to see Officer Martinez, a veteran Fairfield police officer, approaching with his hand resting casually on his radio. Michael felt a wave of relief wash over him, but it was short-lived. Martinez was alone, and 6-to-1 odds had just become 6-to-2. Better, but still not great. "Afternoon, officer." Razor's demeanor shifted instantly, his voice taking on a tone of exaggerated respect. "Beautiful day for a ride, isn't it?" Martinez's experienced eyes took in the scene, the surrounded teenager, the frightened boy in the distance, the carefully positioned bikers. He'd seen this setup before. "I'm sure it is," Martinez replied calmly. "Mind if I ask what brings you gentlemen to our family park?" "Just admiring the scenery," Diesel said with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Having a friendly conversation with this young man here." Martinez looked directly at Michael. "That true son. Just a friendly conversation." Michael met the officer's gaze, his mind racing. He could end this right now, tell Martinez exactly what was happening, and let the law handle it. But he could also see the calculation in Razor's eyes, the way the biker leader was memorizing faces and details. "Yes, sir," Michael said quietly. "Just talking." Martinez's eyebrows raised slightly, but he nodded. He'd been a cop long enough to recognize when someone was choosing their battles carefully. "Well then," Martinez said, his voice carrying a subtle warning. "I'm sure these gentlemen were just about to continue their ride, weren't you, gentlemen?" The tension in the parking lot was thick enough to cut with a knife. Razor's jaw worked silently as he stared at Michael, clearly frustrated at being interrupted just as things were getting interesting. Actually, officer, Razor said slowly, we were hoping to stick around a bit longer. Public park and all. We've got rights. Martinez nodded thoughtfully. That you do. Just like this young man has the right to wait for his brother without being hassled. Funny how rights work both ways. Snake shifted nervously, clearly uncomfortable with the police presence. Tank spat on the ground, earning a sharp look from Martinez. The other bikers maintained their positions, but their earlier confidence had evaporated. From his position 50 yards away, Jordan called out hesitantly, "Michael, is everything okay?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Michael could see his brother's growing distress the way the 12-year-old's hands fidgeted with his soccer ball. Jordan had always looked up to his older brother, trusted him to handle any situation. Now that faith was being tested. "Everything's fine, Jay," Michael called back, using his brother's nickname. "Just give me another minute." But even as he said it, Michael knew everything was far from fine. The bikers might back down now with Martinez present, but they'd remember this. They'd remember his face, his defiance, his refusal to show proper fear. This wasn't ending today. It was just beginning. Razor seemed to read his thoughts. "You know what, officer? You're absolutely right. We should be moving along." He turned to Michael, his voice dropping to a whisper that only the teenager could hear. "This isn't over, suit boy. We'll be seeing you again real soon." The biker leader climbed back onto his Harley with practiced ease, his leather creaking as he settled into the seat. The other bikers followed suit, engines roaring to life in a symphony of controlled violence. As they prepared to leave, Rookie caught Michael's eye for just a moment. The young biker's expression was unreadable, but Michael thought he detected something like regret in the kid's face. One by one, the motorcycles pulled out of the parking lot, but not before Razor made one final circle around the area, a territorial display that left no doubt about his intentions. The leader's eyes locked with Michael's through his helmet visor, and even from a distance, the message was clear. "We know where to find you." Officer Martinez waited until the last motorcycle disappeared around the corner before approaching Michael. "You sure you're okay, son?" That looked like more than just a friendly chat. Michael nodded, his composure finally beginning to crack now that the immediate danger had passed. "Thank you for showing up when you did, Officer Martinez. I appreciate it." "Don't mention it." "But Michael..." Martinez paused, and Michael realized the officer knew his name. Small-town advantages and disadvantages. "Be careful walking home today, and maybe consider having your mom pick you up for a while." The suggestion sent a chill down Michael's spine. If Martinez thought the threat was serious enough to warrant changing their routine, then the situation was worse than he'd hoped. "I will," Michael promised, though he wasn't sure how he'd explain any of this to his mother without revealing why he'd been so calm in the face of overwhelming danger. Martinez nodded and headed back to his patrol car. But Michael noticed he didn't drive away immediately. The officer was waiting to make sure both boys got safely to their ride. Jordan jogged over as soon as the coast was clear, his face flushed with exercise and anxiety. "Michael, what was that about? Those guys looked really scary." Michael forced a smile and ruffled his brother's hair, a gesture that had comforted Jordan since he was a toddler. "Just some guys asking for directions. Nothing to worry about." But Jordan wasn't buying it. At 12, he was old enough to recognize when his brother was lying, even if he didn't understand why. They didn't look like they were asking for directions. They looked like they wanted to hurt you. The perceptiveness in Jordan's voice caught Michael off guard. His little brother was growing up, becoming more aware of the world's dangers. Part of Michael was proud of Jordan's developing instincts. Another part mourned the loss of his brother's innocence. "Sometimes people look scarier than they actually are," Michael said carefully, shouldering his briefcase. "Like how you thought Mr. Peterson was mean until you got to know him." Jordan considered this as they walked toward the street where their mother would pick them up in 20 minutes. "But Mr. Peterson never surrounded you with his friends and made threats." Michael stopped walking. "How much did you hear?" Enough, Jordan said quietly. Michael, are we in some kind of trouble? The question hit Michael like a physical blow. His entire purpose in life was protecting Jordan from exactly this kind of worry. His mother had raised him to be the shield between his younger brother and a world that could be cruel and unpredictable. No, Michael said firmly, meeting Jordan's eyes. We're not in trouble, but I need you to promise me something. Jordan nodded solemnly, understanding that whatever came next was important. If you ever see those men again anywhere you come, find me immediately. Don't try to handle it yourself. Don't try to be brave. Just find me or Mom or a teacher or a police officer. Okay. Okay, Jordan agreed, though his expression remained troubled. But Michael, how did you stay so calm back there? I would have been terrified. Michael's throat tightened. How could he explain years of training without revealing why their mother had insisted on it? How could he describe the hundreds of hours spent learning to control fear, to think clearly under pressure, to assess threats, and respond appropriately? Mom always taught us that staying calm helps you think better, he said finally. When you can think clearly, you can find solutions. It wasn't the whole truth, but it wasn't a lie either. Jordan seemed satisfied with the explanation, though Michael could see his brother filing away questions for later. They reached their pickup spot, just as their mother's silver Honda pulled up to the curb. Elena Carter looked like an older version of Michael. The same dark hair, the same intelligent eyes, the same carefully controlled composure. But as her sons climbed into the car, Michael caught something in her expression that made his stomach clench. She knew something was wrong. How was school? She asked, her voice light and casual, as she pulled into traffic. But Michael could see her eyes in the rearview mirror, studying his face with the intensity of someone trained to read micro-expressions. Fine, Michael replied automatically. Jordan scored 2 goals at practice. Jordan launched into an enthusiastic recap of his soccer achievements, giving Michael time to compose himself. But he could feel his mother's attention, like a weight on his shoulders, her maternal instincts picking up on details that no one else would notice. The slight tension in his posture, the way he kept checking the side mirrors, the fact that his usually perfect hair was slightly disheveled from the afternoon wind. As they drove through the familiar streets of Fairfield, Michael found himself cataloging potential threats in a way that would have seemed paranoid just an hour ago. That van behind them, was it following too closely? The man on the motorcycle at the red light, was that one of Razor's crew? By the time they pulled into their driveway, Michael had identified 17 different vehicles that could potentially contain hostile individuals. The realization that he was thinking like someone under surveillance sent a chill through his body. "Boys," their mother said as she turned off the engine. "I need to make a few phone calls. Jordan, you've got homework. Michael, I'd like to speak with you in my office in 10 minutes. The casual tone didn't fool anyone. Elena Carter's office was where serious conversations happened, the kind that shaped futures and revealed family secrets. As Jordan bounded up the stairs to his room, Michael stood in the hallway staring at the closed door to his mother's study. Behind that door were answers to questions he'd carried his entire life. Behind that door was the truth about why a single mother in suburban Connecticut had taught her son to fight like a professional soldier. Tonight, Michael realized, was the night he finally learned why. The confrontation with the bikers had been just the beginning. As he raised his hand to knock on his mother's door, Michael understood that his carefully ordered world was about to change forever. And somewhere across town, 6 motorcycles sat cooling in a garage while their riders planned their return to Fairfield Park. The real test hadn't even started yet. Michael's hand trembled slightly as he knocked on his mother's office door, the sound echoing through the quiet hallway like a gunshot. The mahogany door had always seemed imposing, but tonight it felt like a barrier between 2 different worlds. The one where he was just a teenager with homework and soccer practice schedules, and another where dangerous men on motorcycles knew his face. "Come in." Elena's voice carried through the wood, calm and controlled as always. Michael stepped into the office, immediately struck by how different it felt tonight. The familiar bookshelves lined with legal texts and family photos seemed to watch him with knowing eyes. His mother sat behind her desk, but she'd changed out of her usual business attire into dark jeans and a fitted black sweater that somehow made her look more dangerous than professional. "Sit," she said, gesturing to the leather chair across from her desk, "and tell me exactly what happened at the park today." Michael's carefully rehearsed explanation died in his throat. His mother's tone wasn't that of a concerned parent asking about a minor incident. It was the voice of someone conducting an interrogation. Professional, thorough, unforgiving. "I don't know what you mean," he started, but Elena held up a hand to stop him. "Michael Anthony Carter," she said, using his full name in a way that made his blood run cold. "I've been watching you since you got in the car. Your posture is defensive. You've checked every exit in this room twice, and you positioned yourself where you can see both the door and the window. Those aren't the behaviors of someone who had a normal day." The accuracy of her observations hit Michael like a physical blow. He hadn't even realized he was doing those things, but now that she'd pointed them out, he could feel the truth of every word. His body had automatically shifted into the patterns she'd trained into him over years of practice. 6 men on motorcycles. Elena continued, her dark eyes never leaving his face. "Road Devils Motorcycle Club, based on the description I got from Officer Martinez. They surrounded you in the parking lot while you were waiting for Jordan." Michael's mouth fell open. "How did you—" "Martinez called me 20 minutes ago," Elena said simply. "He was concerned about the way you handled the situation. Said you were unusually composed for a teenager facing that kind of threat." His words. The room fell silent, except for the soft ticking of the antique clock on Elena's desk. Michael could hear Jordan's music playing upstairs. The normal sounds of a 12-year-old doing homework, blissfully unaware that his family's carefully constructed world was crashing down around them. Elena stood up from her desk and walked to the window, peering through the blinds at the street below. "They followed you," she said quietly. "2 of them anyway. They've been parked 3 blocks away for the last hour, taking turns riding past the house." Michael shot to his feet, adrenaline flooding his system. "Jordan is safe," Elena said firmly. "For now. But this changes everything, Michael. Everything we've worked for, everything we've built here." She turned from the window to face him, and for the first time in his life, Michael saw something in his mother's eyes that terrified him more than any motorcycle gang ever could. Fear. Real, genuine fear. "It's time you knew the truth," Elena said, moving to a painting on the wall, a serene landscape that Michael had looked at thousands of times without really seeing. She pressed something behind the frame, and the painting swung open like a door revealing a hidden safe. Michael watched in stunned silence as his mother entered a complex code and withdrew a thick manila folder. The safe contained other items too, items that made his breath catch in his throat. A different passport with his mother's photo, but a name he didn't recognize. Stacks of cash in various currencies, and something that made his knees weak, a sleek black pistol. "Sit down," Elena said gently, but Michael couldn't move. His legs felt like they were made of water. "Mom, what is this?" His voice came out as barely a whisper. Elena placed the folder on her desk and opened it, revealing photographs, documents, and newspaper clippings that told a story Michael had never imagined. The top photograph showed his mother, but she looked different, younger, harder dressed in military fatigues and standing next to men with weapons. "My name is Elena Maria Santos," she said, her voice taking on a slight accent that Michael had never heard before. "I was born in Colombia, and I spent 12 years working for the DEA as an undercover operative specializing in infiltrating drug cartels." The words hit Michael like hammer blows. Everything he thought he knew about his family, about his life, about his identity, crumbled in an instant. "But you're a paralegal. You work for Henderson and Associates. You help with real estate closings and divorce papers." Elena smiled sadly. That's my cover, sweetheart. A very carefully constructed cover that's kept us safe for the last 7 years. Michael sank into the chair, his mind reeling. 7 years. But we've lived here since I was 9, since Jordan was 5. We moved here when my last assignment went bad. Elena continued, flipping through the folder to show him more photographs. I was deep undercover with the Medellin cartel, working to bring down a trafficking operation that was moving cocaine through motorcycle clubs in the southeastern United States. The mention of motorcycle clubs made Michael's blood freeze. The Road Devils. Not them specifically, but connected organizations. The drug cartels use biker gangs as distribution networks. They're mobile, loyal, and violent enough to protect their territory. I spent 3 years building relationships with these people, earning their trust, learning their secrets. Elena pulled out a photograph that made Michael's stomach turn. It showed his mother sitting on a motorcycle, laughing with a group of bikers who looked remarkably similar to the men who had threatened him that afternoon. She looked completely at ease, completely believable as one of them. But something went wrong. Michael said, the pieces starting to come together in his mind. Someone discovered who I really was, Elena confirmed. They put a price on my head, $2 million dead or alive. The DEA had to extract me immediately and put us in witness protection. Michael stared at the photographs, trying to reconcile the woman in the pictures with the mother who had raised him, who had taught him to tie his shoes and helped him with algebra homework. Is Elena Carter even your real name? It's real enough, she said softly. The DEA created new identities for both of us. You were born Michael Santos in Bogota, Colombia. Your father was my handler, Agent David Carter. He was killed 3 months before you were born. The revelation hit Michael like a physical blow. He'd grown up believing his father had died in a car accident when he was a baby, a tragedy that his mother rarely discussed. To learn that, not only was that a lie, but that his father had been a federal agent killed in the line of duty was almost too much to process. And Jordan? Michael asked, though he dreaded the answer. Jordan is your half-brother, Elena said gently. His father was Marcus Rodriguez, a cartel enforcer I was investigating. I never told Marcus about Jordan. As far as he knows, his son died in childbirth along with the mother. Michael's head was spinning. So Jordan's father is still alive, and he's a drug dealer. Was, Elena corrected. Marcus was killed 2 years ago in a turf war in Miami. But he has brothers, cousins, associates, who would love nothing more than to get their hands on his son. The full scope of their situation was beginning to dawn on Michael. They weren't just a normal family living in suburban Connecticut. They were fugitives hiding from both law enforcement contacts gone bad and criminal organizations with long memories and longer reach. The training, Michael said suddenly. All those years of martial arts, firearms instruction, situational awareness. You weren't just trying to keep me fit. Elena nodded grimly. I was preparing you for the day our past caught up with us. I hoped it never would, but I've always known it was a possibility. Michael thought about all those hours in their basement, learning to disarm attackers, to read body language, to think strategically under pressure. What he'd always assumed was his mother's way of building his confidence had actually been survival training. But how did the Road Devils find us? Michael asked. You said it's been 7 years. Elena closed the folder and moved back to the window. I'm not sure yet, but I have a theory. She paused, checking the street again before continuing. 3 weeks ago, I got a call at work. Someone asking about Elena Santos, claiming to be from my old neighborhood in Colombia. They had details about my life there that only someone with serious connections could know. Did you talk to them? I hung up immediately and changed our phone number. But if they found my work number, they probably found other things too. Address, family members, daily routines. Elena's voice was heavy with guilt. I should have moved us then. Should have activated our emergency protocols. Michael stood up and joined his mother at the window. What kind of emergency protocols? New identities, new location, new life, Everything we've built here would have to be abandoned." Elena's voice cracked slightly. "I wanted to give you boys a normal childhood. I wanted Jordan to have friends and soccer teams and sleepovers. I wanted you to graduate from high school, maybe go to college without looking over your shoulder." The weight of sacrifice in his mother's voice made Michael's chest tight. She'd given up everything, her career, her identity, her homeland to keep them safe. And now, because of one confrontation in a parking lot, it might all be for nothing. "There's something else," Elena said quietly. "Something I need to tell you before we decide what to do next." Michael braced himself for another revelation, wondering what could possibly be worse than learning your entire life was a lie. "The reason you stayed so calm today, the reason you were able to assess the situation and respond appropriately, it's not just because of the training I gave you." Elena turned to face him directly. "You have your father's instincts, Michael. David was one of the best operatives the DEA ever had. He could read people, predict their actions, stay calm under pressure that would break most men. You're saying it's genetic. I'm saying you're naturally gifted at this kind of work. The training I gave you just unlocked abilities you were born with." Elena's expression was both proud and deeply sad. "You handled today like a professional, Michael. Better than most adults would have." Before Michael could respond, a sound from upstairs made both of them freeze. Jordan's bedroom door had opened, followed by the soft padding of feet on the stairs. "Michael." Jordan's voice drifted down to them. "Are you and Mom okay? You've been talking for a long time." Elena quickly closed the safe and moved the painting back into position, while Michael stepped into the hallway to intercept his brother. "We're fine, Jay," Michael called up the stairs. "Just discussing some school stuff. You should finish your homework." "Can I get a snack first?" Jordan appeared at the top of the stairs, his hair messy from lying on his bed. "I'm starving." The normalcy of the request was almost surreal, given the conversation that had just taken place. Michael looked back at his mother, who nodded slightly. "Sure," Michael said. "I'll make you a sandwich." As they walked to the kitchen together, Jordan chattering about his math homework and tomorrow's soccer practice, Michael felt like he was living in two realities simultaneously. In one, he was a 16-year-old big brother making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for his kid brother. In the other, he was the son of dead federal agents hiding from drug cartels and motorcycle gangs who wanted to destroy his family. "You're being weird," Jordan observed, watching Michael methodically spread peanut butter on bread. "You've been weird since the park today." Michael forced a smile. "Just tired. It's been a long day." "Those men today," Jordan said quietly, glancing toward their mother's office. "They weren't really asking for directions, were they?" The directness of the question caught Michael off guard. Jordan might only be 12, but he was smart, too smart to accept obvious lies indefinitely. "No," Michael said finally. "They weren't." "Are they going to come back?" Michael met his brother's eyes, seeing fear and trust warring in the 12-year-old's expression. Jordan was looking to him for reassurance, for the steady confidence that had always been Michael's role in their family. "I don't know," Michael said honestly. "But if they do, Mom and I will handle it. That's a promise." Jordan nodded solemnly and took his sandwich upstairs, but Michael could see the worry in his brother's shoulders, the way his usual carefree energy had been replaced by something heavier. Elena appeared in the kitchen doorway as soon as Jordan was out of earshot. "We need to make a decision tonight," she said quietly. "Either we run or we stay and fight." "What do you mean, fight?" "I mean we stop hiding and start being proactive about this threat." Elena's expression had shifted into something Michael had never seen before: cold, calculating, dangerous. "I still have contacts in law enforcement. People who owe me favors. We could set a trap for the road devils, make them regret ever setting foot in Fairfield." The idea of his mother, who helped Jordan with art projects and attended PTA meetings, setting traps for motorcycle gangs, was almost impossible to process. "But if we do that," Elena continued, "there's no going back to normal. Our cover would be blown completely. We'd have to disappear forever. Michael thought about his life in Fairfield, his school, his friends, the chess club he'd joined last month. He thought about Jordan's soccer team, the birthday party he was supposed to attend this weekend. All of it would vanish like it had never existed. "What if we run?" Michael asked. "What if we just activate these emergency protocols you mentioned? New identities would take at least 2 weeks to arrange. We'd have to go to ground somewhere safe until then." Elena's expression was grim. "And there's no guarantee they wouldn't find us again eventually. Some of these people have very long memories and very deep pockets." A sound from outside made them both freeze the low rumble of motorcycle engines. Michael moved to the kitchen window and peered through the blinds. 3 bikes were parked across the street, their riders making no attempt to hide their presence. "They're not even trying to be subtle anymore," Elena observed, joining him at the window. As they watched, one of the bikers raised his hand and pointed directly at their house. Even from a distance, Michael could see the man's middle finger extended in an unmistakable gesture. "Mom," Michael said quietly, "I think our decision just got made for us." Elena was already moving toward her office. "Get Jordan. Tell him we're going on a surprise camping trip. Pack light, only essentials." "What about you?" "I'm going to make some phone calls," Elena said, her voice taking on a hardness Michael had never heard before. "It's time to remind some people why they used to fear the name Elena Santos." As Michael headed upstairs to pack, he could hear his mother's voice through the office door speaking rapid Spanish into her phone. The conversation was too fast and too quiet for him to follow. But the tone was unmistakable. She was calling in old debts and old favors. Jordan was at his desk, dutifully working through algebra problems, when Michael knocked on his door. "Hey, buddy, how do you feel about an adventure?" "What kind of adventure?" Jordan looked up from his homework, instantly interested. "The kind where we pack bags and leave tonight." Michael tried to keep his voice light, but he could see Jordan picking up on the underlying tension. "Are we in trouble?" Jordan asked directly. Michael sat on the edge of his brother's bed, choosing his words carefully. "Remember how I told you that sometimes people look scarier than they actually are? Well, sometimes the opposite is true too. Sometimes dangerous situations look like normal problems until it's too late to fix them safely." Jordan closed his math book and turned to face Michael fully. "The men from today. They're the dangerous situation." "Yeah," Michael said. "They are. And we have to leave because of them. We have to leave to stay safe. There's a difference." Jordan nodded, slowly processing this information with the same serious expression he wore when trying to understand a particularly difficult math problem. "What about school? What about soccer?" "There will be other schools, other soccer teams." Michael reached over and ruffled his brother's hair. "But there's only one Jordan Carter, and keeping you safe is more important than anything else." As Jordan began packing his clothes, Michael moved to his own room and started filling a duffel bag with essentials. Clothes, toiletries, the emergency cash his mother had insisted he always keep hidden in his closet. As he packed, his mind raced through the implications of what they were about to do. By tomorrow morning, they would be gone. Their neighbors would find empty rooms and unanswered questions. His chemistry teacher would mark him absent. Jordan's soccer coach would wonder why his best midfielder hadn't shown up for practice. The life they'd built in Fairfield would cease to exist, erased as completely as if it had never happened. A soft knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in." Elena stood in the doorway, now dressed in dark clothes that somehow made her look like a completely different person. She carried a small backpack and the folder from her safe. "I've made the arrangements," she said quietly. "We leave in 20 minutes. There's a safe house in Vermont where we can stay while new identities are prepared." "How long?" Michael asked. 2 weeks, maybe 3. Depends on how quickly my contacts can work." Elena's expression softened slightly. "I'm sorry, Michael. I know this isn't the life you wanted." Michael zipped up his bag and turned to face his mother. This woman who had sacrificed everything to protect him and Jordan, who had built them a normal life through sheer force of will and careful deception. "It's the life we've got," he said simply. "And I'd rather have a complicated life with you and Jordan than a simple one without you." Elena's eyes filled with tears the first time Michael had seen her cry since he was very small. "Your father would be proud of the man you're becoming." Before Michael could respond, the sound of shattering glass erupted from downstairs, followed by Jordan's terrified scream. The road devils had stopped waiting. Elena was moving before the echo of breaking glass had faded her hand reaching for the weapon concealed beneath her jacket. Michael was right behind her as they raced down the stairs, his training kicking in automatically. The front window lay in shards across the living room floor, and through the jagged opening, Michael could see figures moving in their yard. At least 4 of them, maybe more, all wearing the familiar leather vests of the Road Devils Motorcycle Club. "Jordan!" Elena called out, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Kitchen!" Jordan's voice came back high and frightened but unharmed. Elena pointed toward the back of the house. "Get him and go out through the garage. Take the Honda. Keys are in the console." "What about you?" "I'm going to buy you some time." Elena's expression was calm and focused, the fear from earlier replaced by something much more dangerous. "Drive to the police station. Tell them armed men broke into our house. Don't mention anything else until I get there." Michael wanted to argue, wanted to stay and fight beside his mother, but another crash from the front of the house reminded him that Jordan's safety had to come first. He found his brother huddled behind the kitchen island, his face pale with terror. "Michael, what's happening?" "We're leaving," Michael said, grabbing Jordan's hand and pulling him toward the garage door. "Right now." As they reached the garage, Michael could hear voices from inside the house, deep, angry voices that belonged to men who had come for violence. His mother's voice answered them calm and controlled, but Michael caught the edge of steel beneath her words. The Honda started on the first try, its engine seeming impossibly loud in the enclosed garage. Michael hit the garage door opener and waited for the agonizing seconds it took for the door to rise, his heart pounding with each passing moment. "Michael," Jordan said quietly, "are those men going to hurt Mom?" Michael thought about everything he'd learned tonight about his mother's training. Her experience, the skills she'd developed over years of dangerous undercover work. "Mom can take care of herself," he said, and for the first time he truly believed it. They backed out of the garage just as the sound of gunfire erupted from inside the house. 3 quick shots that made Jordan gasp and duck down in his seat. Michael floored the accelerator, the Honda's tires squealing against the asphalt as they raced away from their house, away from the only home Jordan had ever known, away from the life they'd built together. In the rearview mirror, Michael could see flames beginning to lick at the windows of their house. The Road Devils weren't just here to threaten them, they were here to erase any trace that the Carter family had ever existed. But as they sped through the dark streets of Fairfield toward the police station, Michael found himself thinking not about what they'd lost, but about what they'd discovered. His mother wasn't just Elena Carter, devoted single parent. She was Elena Santos, a warrior who had spent years fighting the kind of evil most people only saw in movies. And if she could reinvent herself once, she could do it again. They all could. The fluorescent lights of the Fairfield police station buzzed overhead as Michael gripped Jordan's trembling hand, both boys still breathing hard from their desperate flight through the suburban streets. The desk sergeant, a heavy-set man with kind eyes, had immediately called for backup units when Michael burst through the doors, shouting about armed men attacking their house. "Your mother's still not answering her phone," Officer Martinez said, approaching the boys with 2 steaming cups of hot chocolate. His face was grim as he pocketed his cell phone. "Fire department's on scene at your house now. The structure's a total loss." Jordan's grip on Michael's hand tightened to the point of pain. "Does that mean Mom is—" "We don't know anything yet," Martinez said quickly, though Michael could see the concern in the veteran officer's eyes. "Sometimes in situations like this, people get separated during the chaos. She might have escaped through a different route." Michael wanted to believe that, but the sick feeling in his stomach suggested otherwise. The gunshots they'd heard as they fled the flames consuming their house, none of it painted a picture where Elena had simply walked away unharmed. "I need to call someone," Michael said suddenly, remembering something his mother had told him years ago during one of their basement training sessions. Martinez raised an eyebrow. "Who would you call at a time like this, son?" Michael hesitated, realizing he was about to reveal information that would change everything. But with their house destroyed and his mother missing, keeping secrets seemed less important than finding help. "My mom gave me a number once, said if anything ever happened to her, I should call it." Michael pulled out his phone, scrolling through contacts until he found the entry labeled simply, "Emergency." "She said the person would know what to do." "Let me make that call," Martinez said, extending his hand for the phone. "Might be better coming from law enforcement." Michael shook his head. "She said I had to make it myself, said it was coded to my voice or something like that." The explanation sounded far-fetched even to Michael, but Martinez nodded grimly. "Go ahead. Put it on speaker." Michael dialed the number with shaking fingers, each ring feeling like an eternity. On the fourth ring, a woman's voice answered, crisp, professional, and speaking in rapid Spanish. "Elena, ¿qué está pasando?" Michael took a deep breath. "This is Michael, Elena's son. Something's happened." The line went silent for a long moment. When the woman spoke again, it was in accented English. "Michael Santos. I've been expecting your call, though I hoped it would never come. Where are you?" "Fairfield Police Station. Our house was attacked. Mom is missing." Michael's voice cracked on the last word. "Listen to me very carefully," the woman said, her voice taking on an urgency that made both Michael and Martinez lean closer to the phone. "You need to leave that police station immediately. Do not trust anyone in local law enforcement except Officer Martinez." Elena spoke of him specifically. Martinez's eyes widened in surprise. "How does she know about me?" "Because Elena Santos doesn't trust easily, but when she does, she trusts completely," the woman replied. "Officer Martinez, if you're listening, Elena said you were a good man who could be counted on in a crisis. Is that true?" Martinez nodded, though the woman couldn't see him. "I'll do whatever it takes to keep these boys safe." "Then get them out of there. Now. Take them to the old Miller farm on Route 7. Elena will know the place. Someone will meet you there within the hour." Before anyone could respond, the sound of squealing tires echoed from outside the police station. Through the windows, Michael could see a convoy of black SUVs pulling up to the building, their tinted windows and government plates marking them as federal vehicles. "They're here already," the woman on the phone said grimly. "Martinez, those aren't the good guys. Elena's cover has been blown completely, and there are people in federal law enforcement who want her family silenced permanently." Michael felt the world tilt on its axis. "What are you talking about? The government is supposed to protect us. Your mother made some very powerful enemies during her years undercover," the woman explained quickly. "People in high places who were taking money from the cartels she was investigating. When she disappeared into witness protection, they thought the threat was neutralized. But now that she's been exposed..." The front doors of the police station burst open, and 6 men in dark suits streamed in, their hands resting on concealed weapons. The lead agent, a tall man with silver hair and cold blue eyes, flashed a badge at the desk sergeant. "Agent Harrison, DEA," he announced in a voice that brooked no argument. "We're here for the Carter boys. National security matter." Martinez stepped protectively in front of Michael and Jordan, his hand moving instinctively toward his service weapon. "I'm going to need to see some paperwork before I release these children to anyone." Agent Harrison's smile was as cold as his eyes. "Of course, Officer Martinez, always by the book." He reached into his jacket, and for a moment, Michael thought he was reaching for documents. Instead, his hand emerged with a sleek black pistol. "Get down!" Martinez shouted, pushing both boys behind the reception desk as the police station erupted into chaos. The sound of gunfire filled the air as Martinez drew his weapon and returned fire, using the desk as cover. Other officers in the station were shouting some drawing weapons, others diving for cover behind whatever furniture they could find. "The back exit," Martinez called to Michael over the sound of gunshots. "Get your brother and run. I'll hold them off." Michael grabbed Jordan and half-dragged, half-carried him toward the rear of the building, his mind reeling from the surreal turn of events. Federal agents, people who were supposed to protect them, were shooting up a police station to get to them. His mother's mysterious past had followed them even here, to what should have been the safest place in town. They burst through the back door into the cool night air, just as an explosion rocked the building behind them. Michael didn't look back to see what caused it, focusing instead on getting Jordan to safety. "This way," he called, leading his brother toward the parking lot where Martinez's patrol car sat waiting. The keys were still in the ignition, a small blessing in an evening full of terrible surprises. "Michael, I don't understand what's happening," Jordan said as they climbed into the car, his voice small and frightened. "Why are government people trying to hurt us?" Michael started the engine, his hands surprisingly steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. "Remember what Mom always told us about trusting our instincts? Well, my instincts are telling me that those weren't the good guys." As they pulled out of the parking lot, Michael caught a glimpse of Martinez in his rearview mirror. The veteran officer was backing out of the police station with his hands raised, 3 federal agents surrounding him with weapons drawn. At least he was alive. The woman on the phone had mentioned the Miller farm on Route 7, and Michael had a vague memory of the place and abandoned property that he and Jordan had sometimes passed on bike rides. It was isolated, surrounded by woods, the kind of place where a person could disappear if they needed to. "Are we going to see Mom?" Jordan asked as they drove through the darkened streets of Fairfield, the familiar landmarks of their childhood taking on an ominous quality in the streetlight shadows. "I hope so," Michael said, though he wasn't sure he believed it anymore. The image of their house burning, the sound of gunshots, the complete silence from Elena's phone, none of it suggested a happy reunion, was waiting at the end of their journey. 20 minutes later, they turned down the dirt road leading to the Miller farm, the patrol car's headlights cutting through the darkness ahead of them. The old farmhouse sat like a ghost against the night sky, its windows dark and unwelcoming. Michael parked near the front porch and helped Jordan out of the car, both boys scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. The silence was almost oppressive after the chaos of the police station. "Hello," Michael called out, his voice echoing across the empty yard. "Anyone there?" A figure emerged from the darkness near the barn, moving with the fluid grace of someone trained in combat. As the person stepped into the pool of light from the car's headlights, Michael gasped in surprise. It was his mother. Elena Santos stood before them, but she looked nothing like the woman who had raised them in suburban comfort. Her clothes were torn and blood-stained. Her face bore the marks of recent violence, and she carried a military-style rifle with the casual familiarity of a professional soldier. "Mom!" Jordan broke free from Michael's grip and ran toward her, throwing his arms around her waist despite the frightening transformation in her appearance. Elena's expression softened as she hugged her youngest son, but her eyes remained hard and alert, constantly scanning their surroundings for threats. "I'm sorry you had to see me like this, baby. But things have changed. Everything has changed." Michael approached more cautiously, his mind struggling to reconcile this warrior version of his mother with the woman who had attended parent-teacher conferences and helped with science projects. "The house?" he asked. "Gone, along with anyone who was inside when I escaped." Elena's voice was matter-of-fact, but Michael could see the pain beneath her professional composure. 4 members of the Road Devils plus 2 federal agents who were supposed to be monitoring the situation. Federal agents. Michael's blood ran cold. "We just escaped from more federal agents at the police station. They tried to kill us." Elena's expression darkened. "Harrison. You know him. Agent Harrison was my supervisor during my last assignment. He was also taking money from the Medellin cartel to provide them with information about DEA operations. Elena checked her rifle and scanned the darkness again. When I disappeared into witness protection, he thought his secret was safe. My reappearance threatens to expose years of corruption. The sound of approaching vehicles made all three of them freeze, multiple engines moving fast down the dirt road toward the farm. Elena immediately shifted into combat mode, pushing both boys toward the barn. "Inside," she commanded. "There's a root cellar behind the hay bales. Get down there and don't come out until I give the all clear." "We're not leaving you again," Michael said firmly, surprising himself with the strength in his voice. Elena looked at him for a long moment, and Michael could see her making a decision that would change their relationship forever. "Then it's time for your real training to begin." She led them into the barn and pulled away a section of hay bales, revealing a hidden cache of weapons and equipment. Rifles, handguns, ammunition, body armor, everything needed for a small war. "Your father and I prepared this place years ago," Elena explained as she handed Michael a Kevlar vest. "A fallback position in case our cover was ever blown." "My father was here?" Michael asked, strapping on the vest with movements that felt surprisingly natural. "David helped me set up safe houses all along the eastern seaboard. He always said that paranoia was just another word for preparation." Elena's voice carried a note of sadness as she checked Jordan's smaller vest. "He would have been proud to see how calm you've both been tonight." The approaching vehicles were getting closer, their headlights visible through the barn's windows. Elena moved to a position where she could see the farmyard while remaining concealed behind cover. "6 vehicles," she reported quietly. "Looks like a mix of federal agents and road devils. They're working together now." The absurdity of the situation would have been laughable if it weren't so terrifying. Federal law enforcement and motorcycle gang members cooperating to hunt down a family of 3 hiding in an abandoned barn. "Mom," Jordan whispered, "what are we going to do?" Elena turned to look at both her sons, and Michael could see the weight of years of decisions in her eyes. "We're going to remind them why they should have left us alone." She handed Michael a rifle that looked like a scaled-down version of her own weapon. "You remember the lessons from the basement breathing sight alignment trigger control?" Michael nodded the familiar weight of the weapon, bringing back hours of training that he'd thought were just academic exercises. Now he understood they'd been preparing for this exact moment. "I can't use a gun," Jordan protested, his 12-year-old voice cracking with stress. "You don't have to," Elena assured him. "Your job is to be our spotter. You tell us what you see where the threats are coming from. Your eyes are just as important as our weapons." The vehicles had stopped just outside the barn, and Michael could hear car doors slamming, voices calling out orders in both English and Spanish. Through a gap in the barn wall, he could see Agent Harrison directing his mixed force of federal agents and bikers. "Elena Santos," Harrison's voice carried across the farmyard. "We know you're in there. Send out the boys and we can discuss terms." Elena's laugh was cold and humorless. "The only terms I'm interested in discussing involve you and your friends leaving in body bags." "You're outnumbered 12-1, Harrison called back. "There's no way you can win this fight." "I've had worse odds," Elena replied, settling into a firing position behind a stack of hay bales. "And you've never fought someone with nothing left to lose." Michael positioned himself at another window, his rifle trained on the shadowy figures moving around the vehicles outside. His heart was pounding, but his hands were steady. All those years of training had led to this moment. "Contact," Jordan whispered from his position near the barn door. "2 men moving toward the back of the barn. They're trying to flank us." Elena nodded approvingly. "Good eyes, baby. Michael, can you handle the back?" "Yes," Michael said, surprised by the confidence in his own voice. He moved to a position where he could cover the rear approach, his weapon ready. The first shot came from outside splintering wood near Elena's position. She returned fire immediately, the sharp crack of her rifle echoing through the barn. Michael could hear someone cry out in pain, followed by angry shouting. "One down," Elena reported calmly. 11 to go. The firefight that followed was nothing like the movies Michael had watched growing up. It was chaotic, loud, and terrifying. Bullets whined through the air and thudded into hay bales around them. The smell of gunpowder filled the barn, mixed with dust and fear sweat. But through it all, Michael found himself moving and reacting with an almost supernatural calm. When Jordan spotted threats, he engaged them. When his mother needed covering fire, he provided it. The training that had seemed like an interesting hobby had transformed him into something he'd never expected to become. A warrior, just like his parents. "Movement on the left." Jordan called out, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. Michael swung his rifle toward the indicated direction and saw a figure in biker leathers trying to work his way closer to their position. The man had a shotgun and was clearly planning to get close enough to do maximum damage. Without conscious thought, Michael squeezed the trigger. The rifle bucked against his shoulder, and the biker went down with a scream that cut through the night air. "Nice shot," Elena said, her voice carrying a note of pride that Michael had never heard before. The battle continued for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Elena and Michael worked together with an efficiency that surprised them both, while Jordan provided intelligence that kept them one step ahead of their attackers. But Michael could see that their situation was deteriorating. They had limited ammunition, no backup, and their enemies were regrouping for what looked like a final assault. "Mom," he said during a brief lull in the fighting, "we can't hold them off forever." "I know," Elena replied grimly. "But help is coming." Before Michael could ask what she meant, the sound of helicopters filled the air. Military helicopters by the sound of their rotors. Elena smiled for the first time all night. "Right on time," she said, speaking into a radio that Michael hadn't noticed before. "This is Santos. The package is secure. Request immediate extraction." "Copy that, Santos," came the reply through the radio's speaker. "Stand by for retrieval." Agent Harrison's voice rose above the helicopter noise, filled with panic and rage. "Fall back! All units fall back now!" Through the barn windows, Michael could see the remaining attackers scrambling for their vehicles, abandoning their assault in the face of superior firepower. The helicopters were military black, unmarked, and carrying enough firepower to end the fight decisively. One of the helicopters landed in the farmyard, while the others provided overwatch. Soldiers in black tactical gear emerged, moving with the precision of elite special forces operators. "Ma'am," the team leader called to Elena as she emerged from the barn with her sons. "Colonel Martinez sends his regards. Transport to the safe zone is ready." "Colonel Martinez?" Michael asked, recognizing the name. Elena smiled. "Officer Martinez's older brother. He owes me a few favors from the old days." As they boarded the helicopter, Michael looked back at the Miller farm one last time. The abandoned barn where they'd made their stand, the scattered vehicles of their enemies, the dark woods that had hidden so many secrets. "Where are we going?" Jordan asked as the helicopter lifted off into the night sky. "Somewhere safe," Elena replied, pulling both boys close to her. "Somewhere we can finally stop running and start building a new life." But as they flew through the darkness, Michael couldn't shake the feeling that their troubles were far from over. Agent Harrison and his corrupt network were still out there, along with the cartel connections that had started this whole nightmare. Their old life as the Carter family was truly dead now. But maybe, just maybe, their new life as the Santos family would be worth the price they'd paid to earn it. The helicopter banked east, carrying them toward an uncertain but hopeful future, while below them, the lights of Fairfield faded into memory. The helicopter's rotors beat a steady rhythm against the pre-dawn darkness as they flew over the rugged terrain of northern Vermont. Michael pressed his face to the small window, watching the landscape below change from suburban developments to dense forests and rocky outcroppings. Beside him, Jordan had finally fallen asleep, exhausted by the night's traumatic events, his head resting against Elena's shoulder. ETA 10 minutes to the facility. The pilot's voice crackled through their headsets. Weather's clear, no hostile activity detected in the area. Elena squeezed Michael's hand, her calloused fingers a reminder of the warrior she'd revealed herself to be. Almost there, mijo. Then we can finally breathe for a moment. The facility turned out to be a converted military base nestled in a valley between two mountains, its perimeter marked by high fences and guard towers that reminded Michael uncomfortably of a prison. As they approached, floodlights illuminated a landing pad where several other helicopters sat waiting, their crews standing at attention. "Welcome to Camp Redemption," Colonel Martinez said as they disembarked, his voice carrying the same authority as his younger brother, but with an added weight of command. He was a tall man with graying temples and kind eyes that seemed to see everything. "Officially, this place doesn't exist. Unofficially, it's where we keep people safe when the normal channels have been compromised." Michael helped Jordan down from the helicopter, his brother's eyes wide as he took in their surroundings. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter, and Michael could see the glint of sophisticated surveillance equipment mounted on every building. "How many people know about this place?" Elena asked as they walked toward the main compound. "Fewer than 20 worldwide," Colonel Martinez replied. "And after tonight's events, we'll be reducing that number even further. Agent Harrison's corruption runs deeper than we initially suspected." They were led into a briefing room where maps covered the walls and computer screens displayed what looked like intelligence reports. A woman in her 40s with short blonde hair and intense green eyes stood up as they entered, extending her hand to Elena. "Commander Sarah Chen, Naval Intelligence," she introduced herself. "I've been following your case for the past 3 years, Agent Santos. We've been building a file on Harrison's network, and your reappearance has given us the opening we needed." Elena shook the woman's hand warily. "What kind of opening?" "The kind that ends with Harrison and his cartel contacts in federal prison," Chen replied. "But we need your testimony to make it stick. Everything you saw, everyone you can identify, every connection you can prove." Michael felt a chill run down his spine. "You want us to testify against these people in court?" "Eventually, yes," Chen said. "But first we need to dismantle their operation completely. Your mother's intelligence is the key to bringing down a corruption network that's been poisoning federal law enforcement for over a decade." Jordan tugged on Michael's sleeve. "Does this mean we can't go home?" The question hung in the air like a physical weight. Colonel Martinez knelt down to Jordan's eye level, his expression gentle but honest. "Son, the home you knew doesn't exist anymore. But that doesn't mean you can't have a new one, maybe even a better one." "Where?" Jordan asked, his voice small and lost. "That depends on what your family decides," Chen answered. "We can relocate you anywhere in the world. New identities, new histories, complete protection. Or what?" Elena's voice carried a dangerous edge. "Or you help us end this permanently. We've been playing defense against these people for years, always one step behind. You could help us go on the offense." Michael looked at his mother's face and saw something he'd never seen before: uncertainty. Elena Santos, the woman who had faced down cartels and corrupt federal agents, was genuinely unsure about what path to take. "What would that involve?" she asked finally. Chen activated a wall screen that displayed a complex organizational chart. Harrison's network includes federal agents, local law enforcement cartel lieutenants, and biker gangs across 6 states. They've been using their positions to facilitate drug trafficking, money laundering, and witness elimination for over 8 years. Michael studied the chart, recognizing some of the names from news reports he'd seen over the years. Unsolved murders, missing witnesses, investigations that had mysteriously stalled, all of it now made terrible sense. "You want Mom to go undercover again?" he said, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. "Not exactly," Chen replied. We want Elena Santos to disappear completely. What we need is Maria Vasquez, a mid-level cartel accountant who's recently had a falling out with her employers and is looking to make a deal." Elena's laugh was bitter. "Another identity. Another life built on lies. The difference is, this time you'd be working to destroy them instead of infiltrate them," Colonel Martinez said. "And this time you wouldn't be alone." He gestured to Michael, and suddenly the teenager understood where this conversation was heading. "You want me to help?" "Your performance tonight was remarkable for someone with no field experience," Chen said. "Your instincts, your composure under fire, your ability to work as part of a team. Those are rare qualities that can't be taught." "He's 16 years old," Elena protested, her maternal instincts overriding her operational thinking. "So was I when I started working for military intelligence," Chen replied calmly. "Age isn't the determining factor, capability is. And your son has demonstrated exceptional capability." Michael felt the weight of the decision settling on his shoulders. Everything in his life had led to this moment, the years of training, the careful cultivation of skills he'd thought were just hobbies, the revelation of his family's true history. "What about Jordan?" he asked. "Jordan would be kept safe here at the facility," Colonel Martinez assured him. "Full-time protection, private tutoring, everything he needs to continue his education and maintain as normal a life as possible under the circumstances." Jordan looked between his mother and brother, his 12-year-old mind trying to process the adult decisions being made around him. "You're talking about splitting up our family." "Temporarily," Chen said. "The operation would last 6 months, maybe 8. Then you'd all be relocated together with new identities and enough financial support to start over anywhere you choose." "And if something goes wrong?" Michael asked the question that everyone was thinking, but nobody wanted to voice. "Then Harrison's network continues to operate. More families like yours get destroyed, and the corruption spreads until it poisons the entire federal law enforcement system." Chen replied bluntly. "This is our best chance, maybe our only chance to stop them." Elena stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the mountain peaks silhouetted against the lightening sky. "I swore when Michael was born that I would never put my children in danger again, that they would have normal lives, safe lives." "Mom," Michael said quietly, "there's nothing normal about any of this. And there's no such thing as safe, not really. Tonight proved that." Elena turned to look at him, and Michael could see tears in her eyes, the second time he'd seen her cry in his entire life. "You don't understand what you're asking for, mijo. Once you cross this line, once you become part of this world, there's no going back." "I crossed that line the moment I picked up a rifle tonight," Michael replied. "The moment I shot a man to protect my family. I'm already part of this world, whether I choose to be or not." The room fell silent, except for the hum of electronic equipment and the distant sound of helicopters conducting training exercises. Jordan moved to stand beside Michael, his young face determined despite the fear in his eyes. "If Michael's going to do this, then I want to help too," he announced. "Absolutely not," Elena said immediately. "Why not?" Jordan's voice carried a surprising amount of steel for a 12-year-old. "Because I'm too young. Michael's only 4 years older than me. Because I'm too small, David was smaller than Goliath. Because it's too dangerous. Everything's dangerous now." Chen looked impressed, despite herself. "Your son makes a compelling argument." "My son is 12 years old," Elena repeated firmly. "Your son is also the only person who could believably pass as Michael's younger brother in deep cover," Chen pointed out. "Maria Vasquez has 2 children, a 16-year-old son and a 12-year-old son. If we're going to sell this identity convincingly, we need the family unit to be complete." Michael felt his blood run cold. "You're talking about putting Jordan in active danger." "We're talking about putting Jordan in a controlled environment where he'd be surrounded by the best protection we can provide," Colonel Martinez corrected. The cartel safe house where you'd be living is actually one of the most secure locations in the country. We've had it under surveillance for 2 years. A cartel safe house. Elena's voice rose in disbelief. You want to put my children in a building full of drug dealers and murderers? We want to put them in a building full of drug dealers and murderers who believe they're the family of one of their most trusted accountants, Chen clarified. The cover story is that Maria Vasquez embezzled money from a rival cartel and needs protection while she launders the funds through legitimate channels. The plan was audacious in its simplicity. Elena would become Maria Vasquez, a financial expert with detailed knowledge of cartel money laundering operations. Michael would be her son Diego, a teenager, with potential for recruitment into the organization. Jordan would be Carlos, the younger brother, whose presence would make the family unit more believable and less threatening. The beauty of this approach, Chen explained as she outlined the operation, is that it allows us to gather intelligence from inside the organization, while simultaneously building a legal case against Harrison's corruption network. Every conversation, every transaction, every illegal order would be documented. And when it's over, Elena asked. When it's over, you'll have helped destroy one of the most dangerous criminal organizations in North America, Colonel Martinez said. Your testimony alone could put 50 people in federal prison for life. Michael looked at Jordan, seeing the same mix of fear and determination in his brother's eyes that he felt in his own heart. They'd lost everything that had defined their lives, their home, their identities, their sense of safety. But maybe they could gain something more valuable in return, the chance to ensure that no other family would have to go through what they'd experienced. I need guarantees, Elena said finally, her voice taking on the negotiating tone of someone who'd made life-or-death deals before. Complete backup at all times, emergency extraction protocols, and full immunity for anything my children might witness or be forced to participate in. Done, Chen replied without hesitation. And if this goes wrong, if my children are harmed in any way, I will hold you personally responsible. Elena continued, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more threat than any shout. Understood, Chen said, meeting Elena's gaze without flinching. Jordan stepped forward, looking older than his 12 years. When do we start? The question surprised everyone in the room, including Michael. His little brother had always been the optimistic one, the one who saw adventure in every situation. But this was different. This was real danger with real consequences. Jordan, Michael said carefully, you don't have to do this. You could stay here, be safe, let Mom and me handle the dangerous stuff. And let you two have all the fun. Jordan's grin was forced, but genuine. Besides, someone has to keep an eye on you. You get too serious when Mom's not around. Elena laughed, despite herself, the sound breaking some of the tension in the room. He's not wrong about that. Chen activated another screen showing detailed dossiers of their new identities. Maria Vasquez is 38 years old, born in Guadalajara but raised in Los Angeles. She has a degree in accounting from UCLA and has been working for various cartel organizations for the past 15 years. She's known for her discretion, her expertise with complex financial instruments, and her complete loyalty to her employers. Michael studied his new identity. Diego Vasquez, 16, born in Los Angeles, currently being homeschooled due to behavioral problems at his previous school. Interests include martial arts, computer programming, and firearms. They're not exactly hiding your skill set, Elena observed. That's intentional, Chen explained. Diego is being positioned as potential recruitment material. The cartel is always looking for young people with useful talents who can be trained and indoctrinated. Jordan's identity was simpler, but no less important. Carlos Vasquez, 12, born in Los Angeles, good student, plays soccer, completely devoted to his mother and older brother. His presence makes the family seem more normal, less threatening. When do we begin the transformation? Elena asked. Tomorrow, Colonel Martinez replied. You'll spend the next 2 weeks here at the facility undergoing intensive preparation. New accents, new mannerisms, detailed knowledge of your cover histories. By the time you leave here, you'll need to be completely convincing as the Vasquez family. As they were led to their temporary quarters, a small apartment within the facility that would be their home for the next 2 weeks, Michael felt the weight of what they'd committed to settling over him like a heavy coat. They were going to infiltrate one of the most dangerous criminal organizations in the world, with nothing but new identities and careful preparation to protect them. "Are we doing the right thing?" he asked Elena as they settled into their new temporary home. Elena sat on the couch and pulled both boys close to her, the gesture reminiscent of countless family movie nights in their old life. "I don't know if it's right, mijo, but I know it's necessary. These people destroyed our life, killed innocent people, corrupted the very institutions that are supposed to protect us. If we don't stop them, who will?" Jordan yawned, exhaustion finally overcoming his adrenaline. "At least we'll still be together. That's what matters, right?" "That's what matters," Elena agreed, though Michael could hear the uncertainty in her voice. As Jordan fell asleep between them, Michael stared out the window at the mountains surrounding their refuge. Somewhere out there, Agent Harrison and his network were regrouping, planning their next move, trying to figure out how to eliminate the threat that the Santos family represented. But they would be expecting Elena Santos, the DEA agent turned witness. They wouldn't be expecting Maria Vasquez, the cartel accountant, with her own agenda. For the first time since the confrontation in the park, Michael allowed himself to hope that they might actually win this fight. Not just survive it, but win it completely. The transformation from the Carter family to the Santos family had been forced upon them by circumstances. But the evolution from the Santos family to the Vasquez family would be their choice, their weapon, their chance for justice. As he drifted off to sleep in their temporary sanctuary, Michael found himself looking forward to the challenges ahead. He'd discovered tonight that he was capable of things he'd never imagined: violence, strategic thinking, life or death decision-making. Now, it was time to discover what else he was capable of. Time to find out if a 16-year-old suburban kid could help bring down a criminal empire. The answer, he suspected, would surprise everyone involved. 2 weeks later, Michael barely recognized himself in the mirror. The clean-cut teenager who had worn pressed suits to school had been replaced by Diego Vasquez, a young man with longer hair, carefully applied scars that suggested a harder life, and clothes that spoke of money earned through questionable means. The transformation went deeper than appearance. His posture was different. His accent carried traces of East LA, and his eyes held a wariness that Elena had drilled into him through countless hours of method acting exercises. "Remember," Elena said, as they prepared for their final briefing, her own transformation into Maria Vasquez equally complete. "We're not pretending to be these people. We are these people now. Diego doesn't remember being Michael Carter any more than Maria remembers being Elena Santos." Jordan adjusted his new clothes uncomfortably, the designer sneakers and gold chain making him look like a miniature gangster. "Do I really have to wear this stuff? It feels weird." "Carlos Vasquez has expensive taste because his mother can afford to spoil him," Elena replied in accented English, never breaking character even in private. "He's been raised to expect the best of everything." Commander Chen entered their quarters carrying 3 cell phones and a manila envelope. Final equipment check. These phones are your lifelines, encrypted, untraceable, and equipped with emergency beacons that will bring a full tactical team to your location within 15 minutes of activation. Michael examined his phone, noting the modifications that made it look like an ordinary smartphone while hiding sophisticated surveillance equipment. "What about regular communication with the outside? Your handler will be Agent Rodriguez from DEA, one of the few agents we're certain isn't compromised by Harrison's network. He'll check in every 48 hours using coded text messages. Anything longer than 48 hours without contact triggers automatic extraction." Elena opened the envelope and studied the documents inside: financial records, bank account information, and transaction histories that would support their cover story. "This is remarkably detailed." "It should be," Chen replied with a slight smile. "Maria Vasquez has been a real person for the past 6 months. We've been building her identity through carefully placed financial transactions and social media activity. As far as anyone knows, she's been living quietly in Phoenix while working for the Morelos cartel. And now she's had a falling out with her employers and needs sanctuary. Michael added, reciting the cover story they'd rehearsed dozens of times. Exactly. The Hernandez organization in Miami has agreed to take you in, but they'll want proof of your value before offering permanent protection. That's where your real work begins. Jordan raised his hand like he was in school, drawing amused looks from the adults. What exactly am I supposed to do while you guys are being all spy-like? Carlos is going to be enrolled in a private school that caters to the children of wealthy criminals, Chen explained. Your job is to be a normal 12-year-old boy while keeping your eyes and ears open. Children often overhear things that adults think they're not paying attention to. The plan was elegant in its complexity. Elena would use her legitimate financial expertise to help the Hernandez organization launder money while gathering intelligence on their operations. Michael would be groomed for future recruitment, giving him access to training facilities and low-level criminal activities. Jordan would attend school with the children of cartel members, potentially overhearing crucial information that parents discussed at home. Transport leaves in 1 hour, Chen announced. From this moment forward, you are the Vasquez family. Your old lives, your old names, your old relationships, none of that exists anymore. As they gathered their belongings and prepared to leave Camp Redemption, Michael felt a strange mix of excitement and terror. They were about to walk voluntarily into the heart of a criminal organization that would kill them without hesitation if their true identities were discovered. The private jet that carried them to Miami was luxurious beyond anything Michael had experienced, even during his comfortable life as Michael Carter. Leather seats, a full bar, and enough electronic equipment to run a small corporation. Maria Vasquez travels in style, Elena observed, settling into her seat with the confidence of someone accustomed to such luxury. The cartel doesn't spare expense on people they value, their pilot explained. He was a weathered man in his 50s who introduced himself only as Captain Torres. And they value people who can make their money problems disappear. As they flew south over the eastern seaboard, Michael watched the landscape change beneath them and tried to prepare mentally for what awaited them in Miami. Everything they'd learned about the Hernandez organization suggested a sophisticated criminal enterprise that had survived and thrived by being more careful and more ruthless than their competitors. Nervous? Elena asked, though she was still speaking as Maria Vasquez for the pilot's benefit. A little, Michael admitted. It's different when it's real instead of practice. The key is to remember that we belong there, Elena said quietly. We're not infiltrators or spies. We're a family seeking protection, and we have valuable skills to offer in exchange. That's the truth they need to see. Jordan had fallen asleep during the flight, exhausted by the stress of their transformation. Looking at his brother's peaceful face, Michael felt a surge of protective instinct that surprised him with its intensity. Whatever happened in Miami, he would make sure Jordan stayed safe. The plane landed at a private airfield south of the city, where a convoy of black SUVs waited to transport them to their new home. The men who greeted them were polite, but clearly dangerous, the kind of people who could switch from friendly conversation to lethal violence without missing a beat. Señora Vasquez, the leader of their escort said, kissing Elena's hand with old-world courtesy. I am Raúl Herrera, security chief for the Hernandez family. Don Francisco is eager to meet you. The safe house turned out to be a sprawling mansion in Coral Gables, surrounded by high walls and sophisticated security systems. As they drove through the gates, Michael counted at least a dozen guards positioned around the property, all armed and alert. Impressive, Elena murmured, though whether she was admiring the security or assessing it for weaknesses, Michael couldn't tell. Don Francisco believes in being prepared, Herrera explained. In our business, paranoia is a survival skill. They were shown to a guest wing of the mansion that was larger and more luxurious than their entire house in Fairfield had been. Each of them had their own bedroom and bathroom, plus access to a shared living area with a balcony overlooking Biscayne Bay. "Rest tonight," Herrera told them. "Tomorrow, you'll meet Don Francisco and begin your integration into our organization." After Herrera left, Elena checked their rooms for surveillance equipment with practiced efficiency. She found 3 hidden cameras and 5 audio devices, which she left undisturbed while noting their locations for future reference. "We're definitely being watched," she said quietly, speaking in rapid Spanish that would sound natural to anyone monitoring them. "But that's expected. They need to verify our story before trusting us completely." Michael unpacked his clothes and tried to settle into his new identity. Diego Vasquez had grown up in this world, understood its rules and dangers. He wouldn't be intimidated by armed guards or hidden cameras because this was normal for him. The next morning, they were escorted to Don Francisco's office, a book-lined study that could have belonged to any successful businessman. Don Francisco Hernandez himself was a surprise, a distinguished man in his 60s who looked more like a university professor than a cartel leader. "Maria," he said, warmly embracing Elena like an old friend. "I was sorry to hear about your troubles with the Morelos people. Carlos was always too quick to see betrayal where none existed." Elena slipped effortlessly into character, her body language and voice conveying years of shared history with a man she'd never met before. "Francisco, you know I've always been loyal to my employers, but when Carlos accused me of skimming money that his own nephew was stealing—" "Say no more." Don Francisco waved his hand dismissively. "Carlos's paranoia was legendary. The important thing is that you're here now, and we can put your talents to good use." He turned to Michael and Jordan, studying them with keen eyes that missed nothing. "And these are your sons, Diego and Carlos, correct?" "Yes," Elena replied. "They've been through a lot recently. I hope you understand if they're a bit quiet at first." "Of course." Don Francisco smiled kindly at Jordan, who was playing the role of a nervous 12-year-old perfectly. "Carlos will be starting school next week. We have arrangements with several excellent private academies that understand the special needs of children from families like ours." "What about Diego?" Elena asked. "Diego is old enough to begin learning the family business." Don Francisco said, his tone taking on a more serious quality. "If he's interested, of course." Michael stepped forward slightly, channeling the eager confidence that Diego Vasquez would display. "I'm very interested, sir. My mother has taught me a lot about finance and business operations." "Excellent. We'll start you with some basic responsibilities and see how you handle them." Don Francisco's approval seemed genuine, but Michael could see the calculation behind his kind eyes. "But first, there are some people you need to meet." Over the next several hours, they were introduced to the key members of the Hernandez organization. There was Luis Mendoza, the money laundering specialist who would work closely with Elena. Carmen Vega, the logistics coordinator who managed the movement of drugs and money across international borders. And most importantly, Roberto El Martillo Sanchez, the enforcement chief, whose job was ensuring that everyone in the organization remained loyal. Each introduction felt like a test, and Michael could sense the various members of the organization evaluating their story, looking for inconsistencies or signs of deception. But Elena had prepared them well, and their cover identities held up under scrutiny. "Tonight we celebrate your arrival," Don Francisco announced as the formal introductions concluded. "Tomorrow we begin putting your skills to work." The celebration that evening was unlike anything Michael had ever experienced. The mansion's main ballroom was filled with elegant people who looked like they belonged at a society fundraiser, but the underlying current of danger was unmistakable. These were people who had built their wealth through violence and lived their lives knowing that a single mistake could be fatal. Michael found himself in conversation with several younger members of the organization, all of whom seemed genuinely interested in the newcomer. Playing Diego Vasquez, he regaled them with carefully crafted stories about life on the West Coast and his experiences with the Morelos cartel. "The thing about Carlos Morelos," Michael said, sipping a Coke while the others drank expensive whiskey, is that he sees enemies everywhere. After a while, you start to wonder if he's creating the very problems he's trying to prevent. "Smart observation," said a young man named Alejandro, who served as one of Don Francisco's lieutenants. "That kind of paranoia is what destroyed the old Medellin organization. They spent so much time fighting each other that they forgot about the real threats." The conversation continued late into the evening, and Michael found himself genuinely enjoying the intellectual stimulation. These weren't the stereotypical criminals he'd expected. They were sophisticated, educated people who happened to make their living outside the law. Jordan had been introduced to several other children at the party, and Michael watched his brother effortlessly charm the adults while gathering information from casual conversations. At 12, Jordan had a natural ability to appear harmless while paying attention to everything around him. "Your sons are impressive," Don Francisco commented to Elena as the party began winding down. "Diego shows real potential for this business, and Carlos has the kind of observational skills that could be very valuable." "They've learned to adapt quickly," Elena replied. "It's a necessary skill in our world." 3 days later, Michael was accompanying Luis Mendoza to a meeting with potential investors, playing the role of an eager apprentice learning the family business. The meeting was taking place at an upscale restaurant in downtown Miami, and Michael's job was to observe and take notes while Mendoza explained how their organization could help legitimize questionable income. "The key," Mendoza explained as they drove to the meeting, "is to make everything look completely normal. Our clients want to invest their money in legitimate businesses, and we help them find opportunities that provide good returns while cleaning their capital." Michael nodded, though internally he was recording every detail for his eventual testimony. "How do you ensure the investments are actually profitable?" "We don't take risks with other people's money," Mendoza replied. "Our reputation depends on delivering what we promise. Dead clients don't pay fees." The meeting itself was a masterclass in sophisticated financial crime. Mendoza presented detailed investment portfolios that would allow their clients to transform drug money into clean profits from real estate development technology startups and international shipping companies. The beauty of this approach, Mendoza told their potential clients, is that every transaction is completely legal from the outside. The only questionable element is the source of the initial capital, and once that's been properly processed through our system that becomes irrelevant. Michael took careful notes documenting names, amounts, and methods that would help federal prosecutors build cases against dozens of money laundering operations. But he also found himself genuinely impressed by the sophistication of what he was witnessing. After the meeting, as they drove back to the mansion, Mendoza seemed pleased with Michael's performance. "You ask good questions, and you pay attention to details. Those are rare qualities in young people today." "I want to understand how everything works," Michael replied, staying in character as the eager student. "My mother always said that knowledge is the only currency that never loses value." "Your mother is a wise woman," Mendoza agreed. "She's already identified several ways we can improve our European operations. Don Francisco is very impressed with her analysis." That evening, Elena briefed Michael and Jordan on their respective progress during one of their carefully staged family conversations that would sound natural to anyone monitoring them. "The school enrollment is complete," she said, speaking as Maria Vasquez. "Carlos will start classes on Monday. The curriculum is excellent, and many of the other students come from similar family backgrounds." "What about Diego's training?" Jordan asked, playing his role perfectly. "Diego is making excellent progress with Luis. Don Francisco has asked him to participate in a special project next week that could lead to greater responsibilities." Michael felt a chill run down his spine. Greater responsibilities meant deeper involvement in criminal activities, which could provide crucial intelligence, but also put him in significantly more danger. The special project turned out to be a money pickup from a network of businesses that served as fronts for the organization. Michael would accompany two experienced operatives, Roberto and Carlos, a different Carlos than the Morelos leader, to collect weekly tribute payments from restaurants, auto shops, and nightclubs throughout Miami. This is basic collection work, Roberto explained as they prepared for the rounds. Most of our business partners pay promptly and without problems, but occasionally someone gets ideas about renegotiating their arrangements. What happens then? Michael asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Then we remind them why our arrangements are non-negotiable, Carlos replied with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The first several stops went smoothly. They visited a Cuban restaurant where the owner greeted them warmly and handed over an envelope thick with cash. A body shop where the manager had their payment ready before they even asked for it. A trendy nightclub where the owner invited them to stay for drinks and insisted on giving them VIP treatment. You see, Roberto said as they drove between locations, most people understand that cooperation is in everyone's best interest. But the fourth stop was different. They pulled up to a family-owned grocery store in a predominantly Hispanic neighborhood, and Michael could immediately sense tension in the air. The owner, an elderly man named Arturo, met them at the counter with obvious reluctance. "Señor Arturo," Roberto said pleasantly, "I hope business has been good this week." "Business has been difficult," Arturo replied carefully. "My wife has been sick. Medical bills are very expensive. Perhaps we could discuss a payment plan for this month's contribution." The pleasant expression disappeared from Roberto's face. "Señor Arturo, our arrangement doesn't include payment plans. You knew the terms when you agreed to our protection." "But surely you can understand," Arturo began. "I understand that you're trying to renegotiate a contract that was already fair and reasonable." Carlos interrupted, his hand moving almost imperceptibly toward his jacket. "That suggests you don't value our protection as much as you claimed." Michael watched the confrontation escalate with a mixture of fascination and horror. This was the reality behind the sophisticated financial discussions and elegant social gatherings at its core. The organization still operated through intimidation and violence. "Please," Arturo said, his voice shaking slightly. "I just need a little more time. My customers have been buying less the economy." "The economy affects everyone," Roberto said coldly. "But somehow our other business partners managed to meet their obligations." Michael could see where this was heading, and every instinct screamed at him to intervene. But Diego Vasquez would watch and learn, understanding that this was simply how business was conducted in their world. "I tell you what," Roberto continued, pulling out his phone. "I'm going to call Don Francisco and explain the situation. Perhaps he'll have suggestions for how to resolve this problem." The threat was unmistakable. Don Francisco's suggestions would likely involve a painful object lesson that other business owners would hear about and remember. "Wait," Arturo said quickly, disappearing into the back room. He returned a moment later with an envelope that was noticeably thinner than those they'd collected at previous stops. "This is what I have. It's not the full amount, but it's something." Roberto opened the envelope and counted the money with deliberate slowness. "This is 60% of what you owe. I'll have the rest next week, I promise." "Promises don't pay for protection," Carlos said, "but I appreciate your effort to cooperate." Without warning, Carlos reached out and swept a display of canned goods to the floor, the loud crash echoing through the small store. "Clean up in aisle 3, he said with mock cheerfulness. Michael forced himself to remain expressionless while internally documenting every detail of what amounted to extortion and destruction of property. This was the kind of evidence that would help prosecutors build RICO cases against the entire organization. As they left the store, Roberto turned to Michael with a satisfied expression. "What did you learn from that encounter?" Michael chose his words, carefully channeling Diego's perspective while gathering more intelligence. "That consistency is important. If you make exceptions for one person, everyone will expect the same treatment." "Exactly." Roberto nodded approvingly. "Compassion is a luxury we can't afford in this business. The moment we show weakness, the entire system falls apart." They completed their rounds without further incidents, collecting over $40,000 in cash that would be delivered directly to Don Francisco. As they drove back to the mansion, Michael reflected on the strange duality of his situation. He was gathering crucial evidence that would help law enforcement destroy a criminal organization. But he was also gaining genuine insights into how these operations functioned, and some part of him couldn't help but admire the efficiency and sophistication of what he was witnessing. "Diego seems to be adapting well," Roberto commented to Carlos as they approached the mansion gates. "He asks smart questions and doesn't flinch when things get unpleasant." "His mother trained him well," Carlos replied. "Maria knows what this business requires." That evening, as Michael tried to process everything he'd witnessed during the day, he realized that the most disturbing aspect wasn't the casual violence or the criminal activity. It was how normal it all felt, how easy it would be to accept this as simply another way of life. He was beginning to understand why undercover agents sometimes lost themselves in their assumed identities. The line between pretending to be someone else and actually becoming that person was thinner than he'd ever imagined. But every time he felt himself getting too comfortable in Diego's skin, he thought about the terror in Arturo's eyes and reminded himself why they were really there. Not to become criminals, but to ensure that people like Arturo could run their businesses without fear. Justice Michael was learning sometimes required you to walk very close to the edge of becoming the thing you were fighting against. The challenge would be making sure he didn't fall over that edge before their mission was complete.